Hello, Nathan here with PixelPipes, and today we have another Pixel Fragment video, which is the second time I've attempted to record this. My phone decided it didn't want to work with my lav mic, so it didn't have any sound, so hopefully this time works better. So the graphics card I want to show you today is this one right here, and it's kind of an unassuming graphics card other than the fact that it is half height and has a rather bulky dual slot cooler on it. This one is from Sparkle, and to kind of explain a bit about what this graphics card is, we have to go back and talk about a little bit of the history behind it that led up to its creation, because this is actually a high-end graphics card, believe it or not, in 2008. So in 2006, Nvidia released their first DirectX 10 graphics card, commonly known as the 8800 GTX, or the 8800 series. It's a whole range of cards, of course, but the GTX was the flagship at the time when the series debuted. And this graphics card is a huge deal in the history of graphics cards, having been the first to unified shaders and DirectX 10 support. But not only that, but the first to offer CUDA and various other technologies, just incredibly not just innovative, but just kind of an inflection point in the industry that would go on to influence many graphics cards going forward. And so you can kind of see this as kind of the beginning point of a modern graphics card right here. Now, at the time, this was indisputably the highest performing card available. It had 128 what they called stream processors at the time. So yes, they use the same name that AMD does. And I'll kind of flash the complete specs on the screen. But then a little later, in 2007, they released a cut down version of it. This card, the 8800 GT. And this has 112 stream processors, but was priced considerably cheaper at only $250, which was a ridiculous deal, because if you look back at benchmarks at the time, this got scarily close to the performance of a full 8800 GTX in a single slot cooling configuration, which is a reference design. This is a reference cooler. It's a blower style, but the air actually spits out the side here and instead of out of the back of the case, which wasn't necessarily optimal, but this was a very popular card at the time. So how was this possible? How do you get near flagship performance at less than half the size and less than half the cost? Well, it comes down to two different GPUs. This uses the G80 GPU. This was built on 90 nanometer, and this one was based on the G92 GPU, which was built on 65 nanometers to start with. So, couple of things. This had a narrower memory interface, 256 bits versus 384, so there were definitely inherent disadvantages. But the G92 had more than 112 stream processors built into it, and in fact, Nvidia would release a 8800 GTS updated model, which was actually borrowing the name of a previous G80 based card. They would update it with the G92 GPU. Again, shrinking the memory interface, but enabling all 128 stream processors in the GPU. And in many cases, it would surpass the older GTX. And especially as time went on, they would release the GTS Plus, and they would rename it several times to things like the 9800 GTX and the 9800 GTX Plus, and then that got rebranded again when Nvidia moved on to the 200 series of cards, and then the G92 was branded the GTS 250. And that's what we have here. This is a GTS 250. Now, obviously, this one's a little unique. This is far from the reference design. Sparkle did something pretty special with this one. So it is a G92, and it's running with the full 128 stream processors enabled. It compromises on the clock speed a bit compared to a regular GTS 250, but it has a full 1 gigabyte though of DDR3. So yeah, this was an incredibly fast performer in its day. So when you purchase this card, it would come with a half-height bracket or a full bracket that you could swap out yourself. It also has an HDMI port and DVI, and as well, it is one of the few half-height cards to have a 6-pin PCI Express power connector on the back, which is pretty interesting. And I also don't know of hardly any half-height graphics cards besides this one that have a full 256-bit memory interface. They may exist out there, I just haven't run across them. If you know of any, let me know, because that would be interesting. But this is, again, the only one I know of. And I'm not really sure who this was for necessarily. I mean, most half-height computer systems, I mean, generally would have been office PCs, right? I mean, you know, pre-built OEM, HPs, Dells, that kind of thing. And, you know, those systems typically didn't have very powerful processors. They didn't have a lot of airflow. It would have been really restrictive on having a high-end graphics card, but this is certainly the most performance you could get per square inch in such a system at the time by far. Now, of course, office PCs weren't the only situation where a half-height card might be useful. You could have, of course, had a media center PC in your living room at home somewhere that could have possibly benefited from a card like this. You could certainly get a number of mini ITX cases that had half-height brackets inside. And more than that, there was, of course, PhysX at the time. So this could be used in conjunction with a larger, more powerful graphics card, such as, a GTX 280 or GTX 285 or 295. And, this could be your PhysX processor, a very powerful one. In most cases, if anybody actually bothered to add in a card for PhysX, it would have been something lower and more in the mainstream category. But you could certainly do that with this one as well. And of course, there is even a combo card by EVGA, commonly known as the Joker card, that does combine two different GPUs, one G92 and one, I believe, with the GT200, and get PhysX on a single card offloaded from the main GPU. So a lot of kind of interesting scenarios like that. And a small card like this, even in a full sized case or mid ATX case, it wouldn't restrict airflow that much, being so small. So you would not have the issues of your main graphics card getting suffocated if it's sitting kind of in front of it like that. You could still get plenty of airflow going into an intake fan there, for example. Just an idea. But it'll be interesting to see how well, or conversely how poorly, this cooler works, because I mean, this is a tiny fan on a big chunky aluminum heatsink, which doesn't have really even proper fins. It just has kind of a radial fin design, not like the high-end cards that have the thin plates kind of meshed together. There's also a very beefy heatsink, which is kind of rocky, unfortunately, but it's also made to look like it's slanting because it's having to clear the capacitors on the back, but that is, of course, cooling for the VRM. Quite a lot of power density going into this thing. So what do you say we go ahead and we put it in a machine and just kind of play a couple of games with it and see how well it can do, and we'll monitor the temps as well and find out how it does at cooling. Okay, so we got the desktop loaded up here. I could probably load up Vista or Windows 7 with a graphics card like this, but then that would require me to install more memory, get my other SSD out, install the OS, install a bunch of games for just a little quick video, and that's just a bit too much work, so you can just deal with XP. Right off the bat, I guess let's just go ahead and confirm the specs here. And we see GPU Z reads a core clock, as I said earlier, 600 megahertz, memory 900 megahertz, which would be 1800 effectively, and the shaders are running at 1566. We do have 128 unified shaders there, 1 gig of memory, GDDR3, DirectX 10 support, which obviously will not be running on this OS. I just noticed it's running at 8x PCI Express though, which is a little strange. I don't remember, I definitely didn't set that in the BIOS, so I'm not really sure why it's doing that. Shouldn't affect the performance though. And just as a heads up, my capture card at this resolution can only do 30 frames per second, so we're not going to get a silky smooth, you know, capture here. This resolution is 1600 by 1200, which is maximum supported on my LCD. But we'll load up fraps so you have something of an idea, at least, of what the frame rate is underneath, and not necessarily what you're going to see, obviously, but let's start off with some serious SAM 2. Actually, before I do that, let's go into the Nvidia control panel. Real quick here, you can see I'm running driver version 296.10. Not the newest, not the oldest, just somewhere in between, and I thought performs good with retro games. And managing the 3D settings, I want to try a little bit of AA and AF. So let's turn this on. We'll just start with 4x and an isotropic filtering, bring that all the way up to 16x. We'll just minimize that so we can come back to it later. And now we'll load up Serious Sam 2, and we'll just jump to wherever I left off last. Gonna do a little cutscene here, and so this was running really smooth when I did a little test here. Obviously this game is it's from 2005, so you know, for this graphics card, this is going to be nothing. But we do have, well, we have AA and AF turned on, but there's definitely no AA on in the game, which is kind of annoying. Which you can see we've got almost 400, 350 frames per second. So, whoa, that was a weird jump. Hello. Yeah, so I don't know what that's about. We can maybe go back to the settings in just a second and see if we can force that. It might be one of those things we have to use the enhance setting or just use the in-game setting. I think there should be some settings for that. Looks like an isotropic filtering is working. Oh, hello, I don't want to use that right away. So let's clear these out, no pun intended. Yeah, it's the minigun with the clears. It's just a classic combo. Serious Sam's staple, at least the older games. Oh, and I was not paying attention to my health. Alright, well, that's a good place to check the settings here. So we'll go to the video options. That should be under advanced, I believe. And let's just scroll down here till we see. Did I miss it? Alright, here we are. So we got anti-aliasing, which that's not very descriptive. Okay. I'm going to assume that's 2x, that's 4x, and that's maybe 8x. I don't know. Let's try medium here. We'll apply that. And let's jump back in. Yeah, and I can tell already that it is working this time. And it really didn't hurt the frame rate. This game is really... it jumped again. This game is really under demanding for this graphics card. And it just looks incredibly sharp, at least in person. Hopefully my capture card and software isn't completely butchering the quality. Oh, and you know, you have to worry about YouTube's compression, because it likes to recompress the video after you upload it. Seems to do that no matter what settings I try. So that tends to screw things up even further, but you can definitely hear the little fan on the card revving up, and I believe it was a 4-pin connector on there, so it's like PWM controlled, and I just died. But it's PWM controlled, and it does definitely ramp up as the card heats up. So you definitely want to put the card in a system with lots of ventilation, lots of airflow running past it, because it really just has the bare minimum of cooling. Even with the clocks kind of drop down a bit to sort of improve the thermals and the power usage and whatnot. I have a hard time imagining the card doing very well in a half height case. That just seems like you're just asking for problems. But you know, who knows? I mean, maybe it's gonna get noisy for sure, but maybe I think I just blew myself up. But you know, maybe it's, you know, taking that into account with the design. I don't know how rigorously that Sparkle tested various operating conditions, and then, you know, even like a little bit of dust clogging up that little fan. Yeah, I don't imagine that would be. I imagine that would be a very difficult scenario for the card to cope with. Could probably kill it. It was a little dusty when I got it. Just a little minor cleanup, wasn't too bad. But, you know, it's working fine here in this case in a, you know, a full-sized system, not full ATX, but mid ATX case. Alright, well, anyway, let's move on to another game. Alright, and next we've got BioShock. So let's just run right in here. And this was one of those games where you could not get anti-aliasing to work unless you were running in DirectX 9 mode. So it was kind of a trade-off. And you can see the actual performance is pretty demanding on this card. We're only running, the frame rate's just really on the cusp of being playable. I mean, it's smooth enough. But let's see when we get into some actual combat here. I do not have VSync on, because I want to be able to see what the frame rate does here. Alright, here we go. Pick up one of these barrels. Ooh. Yeah, I don't know about this frame rate here. Oh boy. Yeah, so this is, I don't know, it's definitely making the controls feel really stiff and jerky when you don't have a really smooth frame rate in this game. It does look good. This game still holds up visually, I think. Just the art style and the design of everything is just really cool looking. Always loved how it looked. Alright, so if we turn off, I'll just leave it on application controlled. If we turn off AA, let's just see, we'll leave AF on. Alright, and when you turn off AA, doesn't hurt the visuals too much, to be honest, with all these dark environments, but the frame rate is way higher. So let's just see what happens when we get into combat once again. Yeah, that is a lot smoother. I think the way to go here is definitely, at least with this card, leave off AA, or at least play at a lower resolution. This is just a lot more enjoyable, and to be honest, during these fast-paced situations, you really want to have a much smoother frame rate, because you're not going to notice jaggies as much when you're fighting enemies, but you will definitely notice when the frame rate isn't where it needs to be. I'll just play a little bit more of this. You know, this game came out in 2007, so it is period appropriate for this card, but this card is definitely on the upper end of, you know, what people had available, at least performance-wise. This card was not out when this game was first released, but it's, the card it's based on, the 8800 GTX, was out. So just to give you kind of an idea, this is definitely period appropriate, I suppose. Finish killing the dudes. But yeah, so this is working really well. Very smooth in this game. I'm gonna check the temperatures real quick too. Well, the temperature is 75. So it's not out of ordinary for a card like this. As you can see, the fan was ramping up quite high as well, but it's definitely not a cool running card by any means. We're going to leave this running in the background when we play the next game. And that is, of course, Crysis. So, real quick, let's take a look at the settings here, and we do have the resolution set to native as well. Right now everything's set to medium. I'm actually going to change it to high and just see how that goes. If we have to lower it, we will. I'm going to turn off motion blur because it's not my preference. Alright, well, it's holding 30. I mean, that's not terrible, especially by the standards of this game. Yeah, honestly, wait, where? Jeez, they just keep popping up everywhere. Alright, so, honestly, this is pretty good. Now, you know, some of the levels can get pretty intense, to say the least. Seems like no matter where I go, I'm getting shot here.
Oh, I don't have any grenades? Damn. Yeah, really, if I were playing this game back in the day, I mean, this is pretty great. And this resolution is pretty nice in this game, honestly. Like, I think pretty much anybody would be happy with it. We're just gonna clear this out, and then we'll check the temperatures. Alright, I think that's a good spot to leave off on, so let's check the temperatures now. And we're running at 82 degrees. Pretty much the entire time, pretty steady, actually. The fan never got to 100%. The fan duty cycle actually keeps in sync with the temperature, which is, I don't know, kind of interesting there. Yeah, I mean, it was running really smooth, so this is a pretty awesome card, I gotta say, for a wide variety of games, including Crisis, apparently. Yeah, so, I don't know, I think that's all I'm gonna really say about this card. It's really cool. I do like the fact that it has an HDMI port on the back as well for my setup, being able to hook it directly into the HDMI splitter for the for capturing is kind of convenient there. I don't have to use an adapter or special like cable. But if you run across one of these, it might be fun to mess around with, and if you have a half-height style case, could be cool for that as well, although I do kind of worry about the temperature getting out of hand, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. But for its size, the performance is pretty awesome. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this little pixel fragment video on the Sparkle low-profile GTS 250. Thank you very much for watching.